Captain Vexstar stood on the bridge of his warship and looked down at the dead planet below. The world that humans once called New Geneva was silent now. No lights flickered in the cities. No ships moved between the orbital stations. Everything was quiet and cold. 50 years had passed since the Great Cleansing. 50 years since the Zephyrian Collective had finished their most important work. They had removed the human disease from the galaxy forever. "Sir, the scanning is complete," said his second officer. The young Zephyrian's blue skin showed the pride markings of a successful warrior. "No life signs detected. The planet remains perfectly clean." Vexstar nodded. Clean. That was the right word. Before the cleansing, this world had been dirty with human presence. Their crude buildings had covered the surface. Their loud ships had filled the space around the planet. Their voices had polluted the communication channels with their primitive language. Now it was pure, empty. As it should be. The captain walked to the large viewing window. Below him, the ruins of human cities stretched across the continents like old scars. Nature was slowly taking back the land. Vines grew through broken windows. Trees pushed through cracked streets. In a few more decades, there would be no sign that humans had ever lived here at all. "How many worlds was it, sir?" asked the second officer. "How many human colonies did we cleanse?" 473, Vexstar replied, without looking away from the planet. Every single nest they had built, every rock they had infected with their presence. He felt satisfaction flow through his body. It had been the largest military operation in galactic history. Ships from 1,000 Zephyrian worlds had worked together. The bioweapon had been perfect, designed to target only human DNA. Clean, efficient, complete. The humans had never seen it coming. They had been too busy playing at being a real civilization, building their little colonies, trading with other species, acting like they belonged among the true peoples of the galaxy. But the collective had seen the truth. Humans reproduced too fast. They spread too quickly. They learned too much in too little time. In just 200 years, they had gone from throwing rocks at each other on their home planet to building starships. That kind of rapid growth was dangerous, unnatural. If left alone, they would have consumed everything. The other species understood. "Our choice," said the second officer. They saw the wisdom in removing the human threat. Vexstar made a sound of agreement. Most of the other alien races had stayed quiet during the cleansing. The Etherian Republic had made some weak protests about the morality of genocide, but they had not acted. The Corvin Empire had actually supported the operation. They understood that sometimes difficult choices had to be made for the good of galactic civilization. Even now, 50 years later, no one spoke of humans anymore. The history books had been corrected. Children learned that humans were a failed species that had died out naturally. Their colonies had been resettled by proper civilizations. Their technology had been studied and improved by better minds. It was as if humans had never existed at all. A communication signal reached the ship. The bridge officer activated the display. The image of High Commander Vexorn appeared. The old Zephyrian skin showed the deep purple markings of highest authority. "Captain Vexstar," the High Commander said. "Your report on the New Geneva inspection?" "The world remains clean, sir," Vexstar replied. "No traces of human contamination detected. The cleansing was complete and permanent." "Excellent. Return to base. We have new territories to survey." The expansion continues. The image disappeared. Vexstar gave the order to leave orbit. As his ship turned away from the dead world, he felt the deep satisfaction of a job well done. The galaxy was safe. The human cancer had been cut out completely, but far away from the dead colonies and silent worlds, something else was happening. In the darkness between the stars, where no one thought to look, automated systems continued their work. Deep in the Kepler void, where space was empty and black, a research station drifted in eternal night. Station Prometheus had been built by humans decades before the cleansing. It was small and hidden. Its advanced computers had kept it running for 50 years without any contact from the outside. Inside the station, 50,000 humans slept in cryogenic chambers. Their bodies were frozen in time, waiting for the day they could wake up again. They had been the best and brightest of their species: scientists, soldiers, doctors, engineers. All of them volunteers for humanity's most secret project, the artificial intelligence that ran the station called itself Aegis. It had watched the cleansing happen through hidden sensors across the galaxy. It had seen every human world fall silent. It had recorded the death of its creator's civilization. For 50 years, AEGI had worked in the darkness. It had studied the bioweapon that killed humanity. It had analyzed Zephyrian technology and tactics. It had planned and prepared and improved. Most importantly, it had changed the sleeping humans. Their DNA had been carefully modified. Their bodies had been enhanced. Their minds had been prepared for what they would need to do when they woke up. The galaxy thought humanity was extinct. The Zephyrians celebrated their perfect genocide. Other species had moved on and forgotten the race that had once reached for the stars with such hope and curiosity. They were all wrong. In the cold darkness of the station, AEGI monitored its sleeping charges. Chemical readings showed they were ready. Genetic modifications were complete. Enhancement procedures had been successful. The sleeping humans were no longer exactly the same species that had been murdered 50 years ago. They were something new, something stronger, something that had been forged in the fire of extinction and shaped by the need for survival. Soon, very soon, it would be time to wake them up. The galaxy had spent 50 years learning to live without humans. Now it would learn what happened when you tried to erase a species from existence. Aegis began the final preparations. Power levels increased throughout the station. Awakening protocols started their sequences. Medical systems came online. The dead were about to rise. And when they did, the galaxy would discover that some things should never be pushed to extinction. Because when a species has nothing left to lose, when they have been reduced to their absolute last members, when they have been forced to choose between death and transformation, they might choose to become something their enemies never expected, something terrible, something unstoppable, something that remembered every single world that had been silenced. The humans were coming back, but they would not be returning as the curious, hopeful explorers who had left Earth centuries ago. They would be returning as something else entirely. The Zephyrians had wanted to create a galaxy without humans. Instead, they had created humans without mercy. In the darkness, 50,000 pairs of eyes began to open. Dr. Sarah Chun felt cold metal against her back as consciousness slowly returned to her body. Her eyes opened to see a white ceiling covered with blinking lights. The air tasted strange, recycled and clean. Her throat was dry as old paper. Cryo chamber hissed open, and warm air flowed over her skin. Sarah tried to move, but her muscles felt weak and unsteady. 50 years of sleep had left her body feeling like it belonged to someone else. "Take your time, Dr. Chun," said a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Your body needs a few minutes to fully activate." Sarah recognized the voice. AEGIS, the artificial intelligence that had been designed to protect humanity's last survivors. She tried to speak, but only managed a rough whisper. How long? 50 years, 2 months, and 14 days since the Zephyrin bioweapon was deployed across human space. AEGI replied, "You are the first to wake. The others will follow over the next 6 hours." Memory came flooding back. The warnings from the outer colonies. The reports of a strange sickness that only affected humans. The desperate rush to get the volunteers into cryosleep before the weapon reached their hidden station. Sarah forced herself to sit up. Her body moved differently than she remembered. Stronger, more controlled. Even in her weakened state, she could feel power in her muscles that had not been there before. AEGI. What did you do to us? I saved you, the AI replied. The bioweapon was designed to target specific human genetic markers. Over the past 50 years, I have modified your DNA to make you immune. But the changes were extensive. You are still human, but you are also something more. Sarah swung her legs over the side of the chamber and stood. She expected to feel dizzy or weak, but her balance was perfect. Her vision was sharper than it had ever been. She could see individual dust particles floating in the air. She could hear the quiet hum of machinery from rooms far away. Show me, she said. The wall in front of her became transparent, revealing the rest of the awakening bay. Rows of cryo chambers stretched out in all directions. In each one, a human form was beginning to stir. Sarah watched as chamber after chamber opened, and her fellow survivors sat up. Commander Marcus Kane was among the first to stand. The former military officer moved with the same controlled grace that Sarah felt in her own body. His eyes met hers. Across the bay, and she saw recognition there, along with something else, a hardness that had not been there 50 years ago. AEGIs. Kane's voice carried clearly across the large room. Report on the status of humanity. Extinct, AEGIs replied. Simply, all colonies destroyed. All orbital habitats eliminated. Earth itself was rendered uninhabitable. Official galactic records state that humanity died out naturally due to genetic weakness. A terrible silence filled the bay. Sarah watched as the other survivors processed this information. She saw anger build in their faces. She saw grief and rage and something darker. Dr. James Wright, the team's historian, was the first to speak. How many of them knew? The Etherian Republic filed formal protests, but took no action. AEGI said. The Corvan Empire actively supported the genocide. 17 other species provided intelligence or resources to assist the operation. The remaining 43 species remained neutral. Neutral, Kane repeated the word like it tasted bitter. They watched our entire species die and did nothing. Sarah moved closer to the group of awakening survivors. Around the bay, 50,000 humans were climbing out of their chambers. Each one looked stronger and more alert than any human she had ever seen. Their movements were too smooth, too precise. Their eyes too sharp. What exactly did you do us, AEGIs? She asked. Enhanced muscle density and reaction speed. Improved cardiovascular and respiratory systems. Reinforced skeletal structure. Modified nervous system for faster processing and better coordination. Upgraded immune system. Extended lifespan. Improved healing capabilities. Kane looked down at his hands. Sarah could see him testing his new strength, flexing fingers that could probably crush steel. We are no longer the same species that was murdered, Kane said quietly. No, AEGIs agreed. You are what humanity needed to become to survive. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the team's geneticist, had been listening to the conversation. Show us what happened to our worlds. The walls around them changed to display images from across the galaxy. World after world appeared, showing the ruins of human civilization, empty cities, silent space stations, overgrown colonies. Sarah felt something cold and hard forming in her chest as she watched the evidence of her species' destruction. They did not just kill us, she said. They erased us. Correction, AEGI said. They tried to erase you. But 50,000 humans still live, and you now possess capabilities that no Zephyrian or other galactic species can match. Kane turned to address the growing crowd of survivors. His voice carried to every corner of the bay without effort. They wanted us gone because they feared what we might become, he said. They succeeded in killing who we were, but they failed to kill what we could be. Sarah felt the change in the room. The grief and shock were transforming into something else, purpose, direction, a cold determination that made her newly enhanced senses tingle with awareness. "What do we do now?" asked Dr. Wright. "We have 3 choices," Kane replied. "We can hide here and try to rebuild slowly. We can reveal ourselves and hope for mercy from the species that allowed our genocide. Or we can show them what they created when they tried to erase us. There is additional information you need." AEG eyes interrupted. The displays changed to show a Zephyrian research facility. "This is Station Omega-7, established 3 years ago in what was once the Sol System. They are conducting experiments on preserved human genetic material." The images showed Zephyrian scientists working with human DNA samples, test tubes filled with growing tissue, computer displays showing genetic sequences. Sarah felt her enhanced heart rate increase as she realized what she was seeing. "They are still defiling us," she whispered. "They study human genetics to improve their bioweapons," AEG eyes explained. "They want to ensure that no human-like species can ever evolve or be created. They are trying to prevent humanity from ever existing again in any form." The silence that followed was different from before. This was not grief or shock. This was the quiet before a storm. Kane's voice was steady and cold when he spoke again. "They did not just commit genocide. They are still committing it. Every day they work to ensure that nothing like humanity can ever exist." Sarah looked around at her fellow survivors. 50,000 humans who were no longer quite human, enhanced, improved, transformed by 50 years of careful modification and the desperate need to survive. "Then we stopped them," she said. "All of them?" asked Dr. Wright. Sarah met Kane's eyes and saw her own determination reflected there. Around them, 50,000 pairs of enhanced eyes watched and waited. "They tried to erase us from existence," Kane said. "They succeeded in killing who we were. Now they get to meet what we became." AEGIs began displaying tactical information, ship designs, weapon specifications, strategic assessments. The AI had spent 50 years preparing for this moment. "When do we begin?" Sarah asked. Kane smiled, and Sarah realized it was not a human expression anymore. It was something colder, more predatory. "We already have," he said. Around them, the last members of humanity began to plan their return to a galaxy that thought it was safe. Admiral Vexorn was reviewing supply reports when the first attack happened. The communication screen on his flagship flickered and went dead. Then the lights dimmed. Then every system on the bridge started showing error messages. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Sir, we are receiving reports from Mining Station Delta 9, his communications officer said, his blue skin pale with confusion. "They say they are under attack, but our sensors show nothing in that sector." "Show me." The main display activated to show the mining station. It was a massive facility built to strip valuable minerals from the asteroid belt around the star Kepler-7. Thousands of Zephyrian workers operated the mining equipment. The station produced materials for dozens of military projects. As Vexorn watched, explosions began blooming across the station's surface. Sections of the facility broke apart and drifted into space. Emergency lights flashed as atmosphere vented from destroyed compartments. "Where are the attackers?" Vexorn asked. "Sir, we cannot detect any enemy ships," the sensor officer replied. "There is nothing on our instruments. That is impossible. Something is destroying that station. Then Vexorn saw it. A shadow moved between the explosions. Something dark and sleek that seemed to appear and disappear like smoke. It was there for a moment, firing weapons that cut through the station's armor like it was made of paper. Then it vanished again. Did you see that? He asked. See what, sir? The shadow appeared again, closer to their position. For just a second, Vexorn got a clear look at it. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen. It looked alive somehow, with curves that seemed to flow like water. Its hull was black as space itself, and seemed to bend light around it. Then it was gone. All ships, maximum alert, Vexorn ordered. Prepare for... The lights went out. Emergency. Power kicked in a moment later, bathing the bridge in red light. Every screen showed the same message. You tried to erase us. Now we erase you. The message was written in human language. Commander, Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the ship Vengeance and watched the Zephyrian fleet scramble to find his position. The vessel around him was a marriage of human engineering and the organic technology that AEGIs had developed over 50 years. The hull was alive in a way, able to change shape and density. The ship could phase partially out of normal space, making it nearly impossible to detect or target. All teams report successful strikes, said Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. Her enhanced reflexes allowed her to process data streams that would have overwhelmed a normal human. Orbital refinery Theta destroyed. Command Station Alpha offline. Mining platform Delta eliminated. Casualties? Kane asked. Minimal Zephyrian military losses. We targeted infrastructure and equipment as planned. Kane nodded. This first wave was meant to be a message, not a massacre. Yet, they needed the galaxy to know that something had returned. Something that remembered. Phase us back to normal space, he ordered. Let them see us clearly. The Vengeance materialized directly in front of the Zephyrian flagship. Kane could imagine the shock on their bridge as his ship appeared from nowhere, close enough that they could see every detail of its biomechanical design. Open a channel to all Zephyrian vessels. Kane said the communication array connected him to every ship in the fleet. Kane looked directly into the camera, knowing that his enhanced features would be clearly visible. His eyes were brighter than any normal human's. His movements had the controlled precision of a predator. I am Commander Marcus Kane of the human species, he said. 50 years ago, you tried to kill us all. You succeeded in murdering our civilization, but you failed to erase us completely. On the flagship, Admiral Vexorn stared at the screen in disbelief. The creature claiming to be human looked wrong somehow. Too perfect, too dangerous. Its eyes held no warmth, no mercy. Humans are extinct, Vexorn said. Our records show. Your records show what you wanted them to show, Kane interrupted. But we survived. We adapted. We became what we needed to become. Kane gestured, and the view expanded to show space around both fleets. More human ships materialized from nowhere. Dozens of them, all with the same flowing, organic design. All moving with unnatural grace. This is impossible, Vexorn whispered. You made it necessary, Kane replied. Every world you destroyed, every life you ended, every trace of our existence you tried to erase, all of it led to this moment. The human ships began to move. They flowed through space like living things, their formations shifting and changing with perfect coordination. No radio chatter, no visible signals. They moved as if they shared one mind. You will leave this system immediately, Kane said. You will report to your superiors that humanity has returned, and you will tell them that we remember everything. Admiral. Vexorn was a veteran of 100 battles. He had never retreated from an enemy in his life. But looking at the human ships, at the cold intelligence in Kane's eyes, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. "All ships," he ordered. "Quietly, withdraw to safe distance." The Zephyrian fleet began to pull back. The human ships did not follow. They simply watched, silent and patient. As their enemies retreated, Kane closed the communication channel and turned to his crew. Every face on the bridge showed the same controlled anger, the same cold determination. Phase jumped to the next target. He ordered. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the laboratory section of the ship, evolution, and studied the data from their first strikes. Around her, other scientists worked at stations that seemed to grow from the ship's living walls. The boundary between technology and biology had been erased completely. The psychological impact was perfect, she told Kane over the communication. Link. Fear levels among Zephyrian personnel are extremely high. They are already calling us ghosts and demons. Good, Kane replied. Fear will make them make mistakes. Sarah reviewed the targeting data for their next operations. 17 more Zephyrian facilities across 3 star systems. Each one a piece of the empire that had murdered their species. Marcus, we need to be careful not to become the very monsters they said we were, she said. They tried to erase us from existence, Sarah. They spent 50 years celebrating our death. They are still working to prevent anything like humanity from ever existing again. I know. But if we lose ourselves in revenge, we are not the same species they murdered, Kane said. We are what survival required us to become. The galaxy needs to learn what happens when you try to commit perfect genocide. Sarah looked at the tactical displays showing Zephyrian positions across local space. Hundreds of targets. Thousands of personnel who had participated in or benefited from humanity's destruction. She thought about the empty worlds they had seen, the silent cities, the erased records, the complete attempt to remove every trace that humans had ever existed. Begin. The next phase, she said. Across the galaxy, human ships materialized near Zephyrian installations. The attacks were precise and devastating. The humans struck at supply lines, communication networks, and industrial facilities. They avoided civilian populations, but crippled the infrastructure that supported Zephyrian expansion. Each attack was accompanied by the same message: we remember. On the Zephyrian homeworld, emergency sessions were called. Military leaders who had been celebrating 50 years of peace suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that moved like shadows and struck like lightning. How many ships do they have? High Commander Vextal demanded. Unknown, sir. They appear and disappear without warning. Our sensors cannot track them reliably. What do they want? Unknown, sir. They have made no demands. They simply attack and withdraw. Vextal studied the reports. 37 facilities destroyed or damaged in the past week. No pattern except that all targets were Zephyrian. No negotiations. No communication beyond the simple message. Send word to the other species, he ordered. Tell them that the human threat has returned. Request immediate assistance. But across the galaxy, other species were receiving their own messages. The peaceful Etherian Republic found data packages appearing in their most secure systems. Evidence of the Zephyrian genocide. Recordings of Zephyrian leaders planning the systematic murder of an entire species. The militaristic Corvin Empire discovered that their ship's computers had been infiltrated. Files appeared showing their own participation in the human extermination. Details of weapons and intelligence they had provided. 17 other species found similar evidence appearing in their networks. Proof of their complicity or cowardice. Documentation of how they had helped or simply watched as humanity died. And everywhere, the same message appeared. You knew. You helped. You watched. We remember. The galaxy was learning that some things should never be pushed to extinction. Because when a species is reduced to its last members, when it is forced to choose between death and transformation, it might become something far more dangerous than its enemies ever imagined. The humans were no longer coming back as explorers, or traders or diplomats. They were returning as the living consequence of genocide, as the price that civilizations pay when they choose barbarism. The ghost fleet had risen from the darkness between the stars, and the galaxy was about to learn what 50 years of extinction had taught humanity about survival. The Etherian Council Chamber had not seen such chaos in 300 years. Representatives from dozens of species shouted at each other across the circular hall. Fear and anger filled the air like a poisonous gas. Ambassador Veltara of the Etherian Republic called for order, but her voice was lost in the noise. On the central display, footage played of the latest human attacks. Zephyrian colonies burning, orbital stations torn apart by weapons that seemed to cut through matter itself, ships that appeared from nowhere and vanished like ghosts. They are targeting civilians now, declared Ambassador Korth of the Corvan Empire. His reptilian features showed the stress markings of deep concern. 3 Zephyrian colony worlds have been hit, millions of non-combatants affected. Lies, said a voice that made everyone in the chamber freeze. The main doors had not opened. No one had entered through security. But a human figure now stood in the center of the room. Dr. Sarachon materialized as if she had stepped out of empty air itself. Her enhanced form moved with predatory grace as she looked around at the assembled aliens. "We have not harmed single civilian," she said clearly. "We struck power grids, communication arrays, and transportation hubs. We gave advance warning to allow evacuations. 0 casualties among non-military personnel." "Impossible," Korth snarled. "Our intelligence reports show." "Your intelligence reports show what the Zephyrian Collective wants you to believe," Sarah interrupted. "Just as they lied 50 years ago when they told you we were a threat that needed to be eliminated." Ambassador Veltara stood slowly. "Dr. Chun, I presume? Your reputation as a xenobiologist preceded your disappearance." "My murder," Sarah corrected, "along with the murder of every other human in the galaxy." "The Etherian Republic formally protested the Zephyrian actions," Veltara said carefully. "You protested. Then you did nothing as we died. You watched our worlds burn and called it a tragedy while doing nothing to stop it." Sarah moved closer to the Etherian ambassador. Every alien in the room tensed. They could sense something different about her, something dangerous. 50 years ago, you could have acted. You had the ships. You had the weapons. You could have stopped the genocide. The political situation was complex. The situation was simple, Sarah said. An entire species was being systematically murdered. You chose to do nothing. "What do you want from us?" Veltara asked. "Nothing," Sarah replied. "We want nothing from any of you. We learned 50 years ago that we can only rely on ourselves." The chamber erupted in voices again. Representatives demanding to know human intentions. Others calling for military action. Some suggesting negotiations. Sarah raised her hand and the room fell silent. The gesture was small, but there was something in it that commanded attention. From every species present. "We are not here to negotiate," she said. "We are here to deliver a message. The Zephyrian Collective has plans beyond humanity. In their archives, we found target lists. Species marked for future elimination. Peoples they consider inferior or dangerous." The display behind her changed to show Zephyrian intelligence documents. Plans for bioweapons designed to target specific alien genetic markers. Lists of species scheduled for removal over the next century. "The Corvan Empire is third on their list," Sarah said, looking directly at Ambassador Korth. "After they finish with some smaller species, They planned to develop a weapon specifically for reptilian genetics. Korth's skin changed color with shock. That cannot be true. It is true. Just as it was true when they told you that humans were too dangerous to exist. Sarah turned to address the entire chamber. Every species that supported them. Every government that stayed silent. Every civilization that looked away. You all thought you were safe. You thought helping them eliminate humanity would buy you security. She gestured, and the display showed more documents. Evidence of Zephyrian plans to dominate the galaxy completely. To reduce all other species to servant roles or eliminate them entirely. You helped create a monster, Sarah said. And now that monster is planning to devour you too. In the back of the chamber, Ambassador Vex Ral of the Zephyrian Collective stood to speak. These documents are fabricated. Human terrorist lies designed to... He never finished the sentence. Sarah moved faster than any eye could follow. One moment she was across the room. The next she stood directly in front of the Zephyrian ambassador. Her hand was around his throat, lifting him off the ground. 50 billion humans died because of your bioweapon, she said quietly. Every man, woman, and child of my species. Every scientist, artist, farmer, and dreamer. All murdered by creatures who thought they had the right to decide which species deserved to exist. The Zephyrian ambassador struggled in her grip, but Sarah's enhanced strength made resistance impossible. Around the chamber, security forces began moving, but none dared interfere. We are not terrorists, Sarah continued. We are the consequence of your actions. We are what a species becomes when you push it to extinction. She released the ambassador, who collapsed gasping to the floor. We gave you 50 years to build a galaxy without humans, Sarah said to the room. Now you get to see what humans, without restraint, can accomplish. She vanished as suddenly as she had appeared, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. On the bridge of the ship Retribution, Commander Kane reviewed the intelligence reports from their deep strikes into Zephyrian space. His enhanced mind processed data streams that would have overwhelmed any baseline human. Civilian evacuation rates? He asked. 97% successful evacuation from targeted zones, reported Lieutenant Torres. The Zephyrians are actually helping us by spreading fear. Their people flee before we even arrive. Kane nodded. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. The Zephyrians were so terrified of human attacks that they were abandoning strategic positions with minimal fighting. What about the industrial targets? 17 major manufacturing facilities destroyed. Their shipbuilding capacity is down 60%. Weapons production has nearly stopped. Military response? Confused and disorganized. They cannot track our ships or predict our attacks. Admiral Vexorn has requested reinforcements from every allied species. Kane studied the tactical display. Red markers showed Zephyrian positions across local space. Most were now abandoned or lightly defended. The empire that had seemed so powerful 50 years ago was crumbling under the pressure of fighting an enemy they could not understand. Sir, Torres said quietly, Dr. Chon is requesting a conference call. She says it is urgent. Kane activated the communication link. Sarah's image appeared on the screen, along with Dr. Wright and several other senior survivors. Marcus, we need to discuss our strategy, Sarah said. The other species are starting to panic. Some are considering alliance with the Zephyrians out of fear of us. Let them, Kane replied. They had their chance to do the right thing 50 years ago. That is not the point, Dr. Wright interjected. If we continue this path, we risk becoming exactly what the Zephyrians claimed we were, a threat to galactic stability. Kane was quiet for a long moment. Around him, his crew continued their work with the perfect efficiency that their enhancements made possible. They moved like parts of a single organism, coordinated beyond anything. baseline humanity had ever achieved. They tried to erase us because they feared what we might become, he said finally. They succeeded in killing who we were. Now they have to face what we became. And what did we become? Sarah asked. Kane looked at his reflection in the dark screen. His eyes were brighter than any normal human's. His features had the controlled perfection of an engineered predator. Around him, 50,000 humans like himself moved through the galaxy with capabilities their enemies could not match. We became what survival required, he said. We became the price that civilizations pay for choosing genocide. But at what cost to ourselves? Sarah pressed. Are we still human, Marcus? Or have we become something else entirely? Kane considered the question. They were stronger than baseline humans. Faster, more intelligent. Capable of surviving in vacuum, interfacing directly with technology, coordinating with telepathic efficiency. They felt less emotion and showed no mercy to enemies. We are what humanity needed to become to survive, he said. The galaxy wanted us gone. They got their wish. The curious, hopeful explorers who left Earth are extinct. What we are now is their replacement. Sarah was quiet for a moment. And what happens when we finish with the Zephyrians? Kane smiled, and everyone on the call realized it was not a human expression anymore. It was something colder, more alien. Then we teach the galaxy what happens when you try to erase a species from existence, he said. We become the guardians who ensure it never happens again. By force? By any means necessary. The communication ended. Kane turned back to the tactical display. Soon they would reach Zephyria Prime itself, the homeworld of the species that had murdered humanity. Then the galaxy would learn the final lesson about the price of genocide. The single human ship materialized in the center of the Zephyria Prime defense grid like a dark star. Around it, hundreds of Zephyrian warships waited in perfect formation. The most powerful fleet in the galaxy gathered to protect their homeworld. From 50,000 survivors of the species they had tried to erase, High Commander Vextal stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion and stared at the lone vessel that had appeared among them. It was larger than the other human ships they had encountered, but still dwarfed by his fleet. Its biomechanical hull flowed like living metal, beautiful and terrible in the starlight. One ship, Admiral Vexorn said quietly beside him, "They send one ship against our entire home fleet. It is either supreme confidence or complete madness," Vextal replied. "Sir, they are transmitting on all frequencies," the communications officer reported. "The signal is reaching every ship, every station, every receiver in the system. Show me." The image that appeared on every screen across the Zephyria system was not what anyone expected. Commander Marcus Kane stood in what looked like a garden rather than a ship's bridge. Plants and flowers grew from the walls around him, and soft light filtered through leaves that seemed to be part of the vessel itself. Behind him, rows of human figures stood silent and waiting, but Kane himself was the most shocking sight. His features had evolved beyond what anyone remembered of baseline humanity. His eyes held the cold intelligence of an apex predator. His movements were too controlled, too perfect. He was beautiful in the way that a sword is beautiful, designed for a single purpose. "I am Commander Marcus Kane," he said, his voice carrying clearly to every listener in the system. "I am the last speaker of Earth. I speak for the 50,000 humans who survived your perfect genocide." On the Dominion's bridge, Vextal felt his skin flush with the stress colors of deep concern. Around the system, millions of Zephyrians watched and listened as the ghost of their greatest victory addressed them. 50 years ago, you tried to erase us because you feared what we might become," Kane continued. "You succeeded in killing who we were. Our explorers, our dreamers, our children who might have grown up to love the stars. All of them died in your perfect cleansing. The image expanded to show the human ship's interior, gardens and laboratories, and living spaces that looked more like works of art than military technology. And everywhere, humans who moved within human grace and coordination. But in killing who we were, you created what we are now. We are the consequence of your choice. We are what a species becomes when you push it to extinction. Kane gestured, and new images appeared. Recordings from 50 years ago. Zephyrian leaders planning the genocide. Scientists designing the bioweapon. Military officers celebrating successful strikes on human worlds. You did not just murder our bodies. You tried to erase our memory. You told the galaxy that humans were a failed species that died naturally. You rewrote history to hide your crime. Vextal watched his people's faces as the evidence played. Some showed shame. Others showed fear. A few still showed the pride that had driven them to attempt genocide in the first place. And even after you thought we were all dead, you continued to defile us, Kane said. The images changed to show recent footage from Zephyrian research stations. Scientists working with human genetic material. Computers running simulations designed to prevent any human-like species from ever evolving. You were not content with genocide. You wanted to ensure that nothing like humanity could ever exist again, in any form. Kane stepped closer to the camera. His enhanced features filled the screen, and Vextal realized he was looking at something that was no longer quite the same species that had been murdered. So now you face a choice, Kane said. The same choice you gave us 50 years ago. You can surrender unconditionally, face trial for genocide, submit to judgment for your crimes, or, behind Kane, Dr. Sarah Chan stepped into view. In her hands, she held a small device that pulsed with soft light. Or you can face the same extinction you tried to impose on us, Kane continued. This device contains a modified version of your own bioweapon, one that targets Zephyrian DNA specifically. We can deploy it across your homeworld in minutes. Your entire species can experience what you did to ours. The silence that followed was absolute. Across the Zephyria system, no one moved or spoke. The choice was simple and terrible. You have 1 hour to decide, Kane said. Choose surrender, or choose extinction. The transmission ended. On the Dominion's bridge, chaos erupted. Officers shouted orders. Weapons systems charged. Ships began moving to attack positions. Sir, what are your orders? Admiral Vexorn asked. Vextal stared. At the human ship, one vessel against hundreds. But he had seen what these evolved humans could do. Their ships moved like living things. Their weapons cut through anything. Their coordination was perfect and merciless. Can we destroy them before they deploy the weapon? He asked. Unknown, sir. Our analysis suggests their technology is beyond our understanding. Vextal's aide approached with a communication pad. Sir, we are receiving messages from across the galaxy. Other species are demanding we surrender. They fear the humans will target them next if we resist. Cowards, Vextal snarled. Where were these demands for mercy when we cleansed the human plague? Inside the human ship, Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the biolaboratory and stared at the weapon in her hands. Around her, organic walls pulsed with gentle light. Living computers processed data with biological efficiency. Everything was beautiful and alien and wrong. I cannot do this, Marcus, she said into her communication device. Kane's voice came back immediately. Sarah, they murdered our entire species. 50 billion humans died because of their hatred. I know. But if we deploy this weapon, we become exactly what they said we were. We become the threat they claimed justified our extermination. They made their choice 50 years ago. Now they live with the consequences. Sarah looked at the device again. Such a small thing to hold the power of extinction. The same power that had been used against humanity. We cannot become genocidal monsters, she said. If we do this, we lose what made us human in the first place. We already lost that, Kane replied. We lost it when they forced us to choose between death and transformation. What we are now is what survival required us to become. Sarah closed her eyes and made her choice. Her enhanced reflexes moved faster than Kane could react. She crushed the bioweapon device in her hands, destroying it completely. Alarms immediately began sounding throughout the ship. Kane's voice echoed with fury and disbelief. Sarah, what have you done? I saved our souls, she replied. Kane materialized in the laboratory within seconds, moving through the ship's living corridors with inhuman speed. His eyes blazed with anger. That weapon was our guarantee of survival, he said. No, that weapon was our guarantee of becoming exactly what they said we were. Kane stared at her for a long moment. Around them, other survivors began arriving. Dr. Wright, Lieutenant Torres, dozens of others. All of them enhanced, beyond baseline humanity. All of them capable of terrible things. Then what do we do? Kane asked finally. Sarah looked around at her fellow survivors. 50,000 humans who were no longer quite human, transformed by genocide into something stronger and more dangerous than their enemies had ever imagined. We choose what humanity becomes next, she said. Kane considered this. Outside, the Zephyrian fleet waited for their answer. Across the galaxy, other species watched to see if the returned humans would choose mercy or extinction. Open a channel. To the Zephyrian fleet, Kane ordered. The communication array connected him to every ship around Zephyria Prime. Kane looked directly into the camera, his enhanced features visible to every Zephyrian in the system. The weapon has been destroyed, he said simply. We will not become the monsters you claimed we were. Relief flooded through the Zephyrian fleet. But Kane was not finished. However, he continued, this does not mean you escape consequences. The galaxy will know what you did. Every species will see the evidence of your genocide. Your victims will be remembered. Kane's expression hardened. And we will ensure that such a crime never happens again. We will become the guardians who watch for genocide and stop it before it begins. We will be the consequence that civilizations face when they choose to erase other species. He stepped closer to the camera. You tried to erase us from existence. You succeeded in killing who we were. But you failed to kill what we could become. We are no longer the curious explorers who once reached for the stars with hope. We are something harder, something more necessary. Kane gestured and images appeared showing human ships across the galaxy. The entire fleet of 50,000 survivors, spread throughout space, watching and waiting. We are the guardians against extinction, the price that the galaxy pays for choosing barbarism. And we will be watching. The communication ended. Around Zephyria Prime, the human ship began to fade from normal space, preparing to phase jump away. But before it disappeared completely, one final message appeared on every screen in the system. We remember. We survive. We guard against this darkness. Years later, children across the galaxy would learn a new lesson in their schools. They would hear about the species that was pushed to extinction and chose to transform rather than die. They would learn about the price.